Hello and welcome back to another edition of Jump to It for Irish Racing, where we'll be previewing this weekend's racing action from Ayr, Newbury and Gowran Park. We've got some feature races for you. My guests today, once again, are Vincent Finegan and Ed Quigley. Vincent, I'll start with you. Just give us a quick recap of Irish Champions Weekend. Lots of great performances from there.
Oh yeah, fantastic weekend. Didn't get the crowds they were expecting, really. There was 10,000 turned up at Leopardstown the first day for the Irish Champion Stakes, and then we had about 6,500 at the Curragh the following day, where it poured rain all morning. But the racing itself was fantastic. We had some great performances. The obvious one from the first day was Luxembourg. Terrific training performance made in O'Brien. The horse was an unbeaten champion 2-year-old, then had a setback after finishing third in the English Guineas. He brought the horse back from injury to win the Royal Whip at the Curragh, where it only fell in, and then a month later it comes out and wins an Irish Champion Stakes. Heading off to France now for the Arc, looks like the most likely favourite at this stage, the way things are shaping up. Terrific performance from him. The other one we had on that day, the one that was slightly disappointing, was Homeless Songs. She was most impressive when winning an Irish 1,000 guineas. She bolted in that day. We hadn't seen her since. They were waiting on softer ground, so they kept her for more of an autumn campaign, I presume. A little bit disappointing she finished third. I was hoping we'd see that electric turn of pace from her. We didn't quite get that. Maybe she needed the run. We give her another chance the next day. Hopefully she'll get her ground coming up over the next 8 to 10 weeks, and we might see her produce something similar to what she did in the Guineas. Then on Sunday, we'd loads of great performances on Sunday. It really was a terrific day in the Curragh. The big one, obviously, Kyprios. Was fantastic in the Ledger. Only a 4-year-old, a real stayer of note, winning 3 Group 1s in a row, has beaten the best that's around at this stage in the staying division, and has got years and years to go, you'd imagine. Could be anything over the next 4 or 5 years. Then we also had a really impressive Dermot Weld filly, Tahira. She beat Meditate. She's a half-sister to Tarnawa. That really was, if you get a chance to watch that race back, that was some performance, because Meditate was a very high caliber horse going into it, and she'd produced some really good form up to that. She shot a couple of lengths clear, but Chris Hayes oozed confidence on the winner, and she looks really good. Something to really look forward to for the Weld camp as well. And then the one for me, Highfield Princess, John Quinn. What a performance. Bolted up again, and that's 3 Group 1s in a row. This is a filly that was beaten off 57 on handicap debut. It's hard to believe, isn't it? And has now won 3 Group 1s in a row, and probably could win 3 more soon enough. Terrific weekend. Really enjoyed it. Great racing.
Lovely stuff. Well, we will go back to Luxembourg and, of course, going on to the Arc, potentially the big story of the week, Baaeed swerving the Arc. I know, Ed, you've got some views on this, so just take us through what you make of the decision, and do you think it's the right call?
Yeah, I mean, generally, he'll have a lot of the platitudes everyone else has got in terms of it's the safe option, it's the obvious option. I mean, looking at it, he's going to be in a match against last year's Derby winner, Ayr, isn't he, to win the Champion Stakes and retire with his unbeaten record intact. I mean, he's going to go off a 2-7 favourite, 1-4, something like that. Yeah, look, 10 furlongs, Ascot, it feels logical. It just feels really boring, doesn't it? But in racing, we always kind of want more. We want more excitement. Baaeed in the Arc is just magic stuff, isn't it? Going into unknown territory stamina-wise, taking on all the best horses in Europe. It's exciting. Whereas going to the Champion Stakes as a 1-4 poke, it just feels a kind of, we've been there and seen it all. And he's going to retire without probably anyone having any kind of idea actually how good Baaeed is. The one little curveball I got here is, and I wonder what would there be some kind of heated discussions around the table, is just for argument's sake, the ground goes to total pot in the build-up to the Champion Stakes, and we've got heavy ground. Will they run him? And then that would be even more of a sour taste if they kind of draw stumps of Baaeed's career comes to an end with him being declared a non-runner, having swerved the Arc, which could end up being good ground if you look at long-range forecasts for Paris. Look, there's a load of imponderables, but I just wonder, if the ground, I know there's a lot of ifs going on here, but if the ground did come up heavy, which is far from out the question, looking at previous Champion Stakes at Ascot in October, would they consider a plan B? Could they talk it into connections for one more year? There's all these ifs. Look, it's the logical thing to do. Probably beat Ayr. We'll jog around it 1-4 and win, and we'll be going, clapping our hands and saying how good he was. But he would retire almost with us feeling there was so much more under the bonnet. And, we always want more. I'd love to see him over 12 furlongs in the Arc, taking on all the top horses from Europe. I mean, that's what's... it's kind of the billboard dream, isn't it? But no, it sounds like, he's going to Ascot, and all in all, should be a fairly straightforward assignment as he retires off into the sunset.
Well, Vincent, as well, you raised the point that his stud career should also be pretty lucrative. So there's no reason to really go push him over that longer trip in the Arc. Any further comments from you, Vincent, on Baaeed?
Yeah, well, the first thing is here is like it's a stud career. Great, okay, fantastic. What's that about? Is that about money, or what is it about realistically? Because the people who own this horse don't need the money. That's the first thing. The other thing is the man who formerly owned this, Hamdan Al Maktoum, before he died, like, he was a real sportsman. I think he'd have gone Arc myself. But then again, his daughter, I'm not quite sure how much of a say she has in this, to be honest with you. I know she owns the horse, but you get the impression that the trainer has been the one pushing the agenda all the way here. The racing manager was inclined to think Arc. I don't know whether she had much of an opinion on herself. She doesn't speak very much publicly about it, and she's willing to let the trainer do what he does, which is fair enough. But like, it seems to be just a touch of a cop-out, doesn't it? Ultimately, is there any reason why this horse couldn't have run on at 4? No reason in the world, really, because he's a class act. He's going to be a much sought after stallion at stud, no matter what happens here. Whether he was to run in the Arc, get beaten, run in the Champion Stakes, get beaten, run all the next season, and not win a race, he's still got a very high caliber horse that everyone's going to want to go to. Perfect because he was a miler and a 1.25 mile horse. He looks better over the 1.25 mile, to be fair, than he did even over the mile, which shows the potential is still there, very untapped. I'd love to have seen him in the Arc. I'd love to see him race on at 4. We're not going to see either of them, so we just take what we get when he goes in the Champion Stakes, and let's hope he produces something magical again, which he's done time and time again.
And obviously, at odds of 3-1, 4-1 on, he should produce that magic once again. But obviously, yeah, like Ed says, it would be nice to see that kind of, the fairy tale story, seeing how good he is as well over the longer distance. But we'll have to just kind of deal with what we get. And speaking of that, we're going to move on to this weekend's racing. The first feature race we're going to talk about is at Ayr. So before we go into that, Ed, I just want to get your view on the going and Ayr as a racetrack as well. Is there any kind of pointers that we need to be looking at as punters for Ayr?
Well, it's sunny in Scotland at the moment, isn't it? It had a bit of rain earlier in the week. Most of the word soft is disappearing from the going description. I mean, at the time of recording on Friday, officially good to soft in places. And I think it's generally going to be just dry and sunny. So you look at it, more or less good ground for this assignment. Again, the draw, well, we've had this chat on here a million times, haven't we? It's just the type of thing that can tie you in knots. You know, you think you've got it just 1 year and you're on the high numbers, then it's the low numbers. Oh, then they all come down the middle. I mean, if you go through last year's fields, as a general rule, looking at the racing, including like the Ayr Gold Cup, you generally wanted to be middle to high. I think 4 of the first 5 home in last year's Ayr Gold Cup were all drawn 15 or higher. You know, that the high numbers dominated. But again, it could be where the pace is. There can be an unknown bias. So, yeah, all in all, I say it every time, and it sounds like a massive cop-out, but I think if you've got half an hour on your hands to be worrying about draw bias, you've got too much time on your hands, personally, because I say by the time you think you've got it cracked, it's totally inverted. But, yeah, it's going to be good ground. It's going to be lovely weather. And there's some big fields. It's a really competitive action.
All right, so the first race we're going to talk about is the 305 for the Fillies here, so over 6 furlongs. We've got who is it, the favourite, sorry, Queen Me for Kevin Ryan. I just wanted to get your view, Vincent. Kevin Ryan's not in particularly scintillating form over the last couple of weeks, but would that put you off just the yards form, or is it just you're basically looking at the horse itself?
I'd be more inclined to look at the horse here. Look, if there was a stable that was completely out of form, we've had the Weld stable went through a long period in Ireland this summer where it couldn't get a winner. But having said that, they do bounce back. They bounce back very quickly. I like this Queen Me. I think she's got a real edge here on form. Her run in York was really good. That was in the Lowther in York. That was a very high class field, much better field than what we see here. And what was interesting with Queen Me that day was that she was looking to emulate, I think it was her dam, her grand dam, and her great grand dam had all won that Lowther Stakes before, which is astonishing. And she went very close, only beaten a neck. There were some real good ones in behind. I think that form looks very strong. I think she'd be very hard to beat. In that race is another horse that runs here, Maria Branwell, and she was 3 1/4 lengths behind that day. So. And that looks like a fair yardstick, Maria Branwell. Like, she looks to decent enough form all the way through. I wouldn't be surprised to see Maria Branwell run well here. The other race that really you got to take into account here is there's a race was run 2 weeks ago in Salisbury, a Group 3, and you've got 4 of them ran in that. You had Maria Branwell finished 5th in it, but All the Time was 2nd, Immortal Beauty was 4th, and Poetic Union finished 9th. Was a little bit disappointing, but they're trying to tongue strap on that for the first time on Saturday. So it's an open enough race with the exception of one. I think if Queen Me produces the form of the Louder, I think Queen Me wins. And
for you, Ed, how have you assessed this race?
Yeah, I'd pretty much agree with anything Vincent said there. I mean, I slightly disagree over the Kevin Ryan form, in the sense you're right that he's had a pretty quiet kind of time of things over the last month, but he did fire in a double on the opening day of this meeting. So maybe the yard have turned a corner to some extent. I think you're right. He still only stands at about 6 winners from their last 55 runners. So as an overall view of the last month, yeah, they're probably below where they would be, but they might just be coming into form at the right time. And I agree with Vincent. If she can repeat a Lowther run, she's the one they've all got to beat here. I mean, you could take official ratings of 2-year-olds with a pinch of salt because they're all still progressing at different rates. But, 106. If anything can run north of 106 here, they're going to have to be, I'm struggling to see who can run north of 106 is what I'm saying, other than Queen Me. If she can just repeat what she did last time out, I think that will suffice. So undoubtedly 6-4 in a 12, 13 runner race full of 2-year-olds sometimes won't kind of float your boat, but she's the worthy favourite, and I think on balance will take all the beating.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to the next race, the Ayr Gold Cup. Ed, you've already touched on it briefly in the intro to Ayr, but just take us through how you're assessing this race. 25 declared, obviously it's a massive field, so it's going to be hard to kind of pick a really strong value choice, I imagine. But just take us through your thoughts on the makeup of this race.
Yeah, really straightforward, isn't it, this one? As I say, I mean, look, I suppose the go-to place to start with would be Kanjar for the William Haggis team, because that individual's, the yard have been in great form, and that individual rides here on the back of a wing, comes in here under a penalty, clearly looks above average. It's just, again, I touched upon it earlier, the draw is the unknown, and it's very hard for punters to kind of shoot and score at this kind of stage until we've perhaps seen a bit more of the evidence and how things are playing out. But, Kanjar's drawn in 5. Looking back at last year's race as kind of suitable evidence. And again, I actually think last year's renewal may hold the key to this. It was on very similar ground. The high numbers dominated, other than the runner-up, I think, was drawn in 1. And I just wonder if last year's first and third are probably the two to be looking at again. Bielsa won the race last year. Been out of sorts recently, but it's that aforementioned Kevin Ryan team again. They might just be coming back to hand, and he's only £1 higher than when winning it last year, and he's got the draw in 17. So I think there's no excuses for last year's winner Bielsa to try and go back to back. But my slight preference, would be for last year's third, Mr. Wagyu, who's represents the John Quinn team, who had a terrific season, haven't they? A Group 1 winning season. Jason Hartenboard was third last year, despite not quite getting the rub of the green. And I think drawing in 15 again should be right in the mix. So, yeah, I put the asterisk, the proviso of, it's always a good excuse, isn't it? When you tip something up and then it's drawn on the wrong side and you can almost kind of deny responsibility after. But essentially, there is guesswork involved in the draw. There always is. And there's a lot of luck in running these races. But I think last year's performers, they clearly, these trainers target them to come back 12 months later. And, I'd be very interested in Mr. Wagyu and Bielsa. I suppose the biggest story, Joe, is Jim Goldie. Of course, you've probably seen the news this week. This is his favourite race, essentially. I think he had a hat for that horses entered, and he essentially forgot to declare them. Jim Goldie, veteran trainer, his home race, if you like, the Scottish trainer. And he didn't really go into too much detail exactly what he was doing, but somehow some form of admin mix-up. And I think there were a few tricky phone calls to owners, shall we say, when the race they've been targeting for the last 12 months, those horses weren't in it. But anyway, I think it's all been taken in good spirits. But fascinating race. Kanjar looks the most progressive, but I think there's a whole host of challenges in there. And as I say, I think Bielsa, Mr. Wagyu, both double-figure prices. First and third last year on very competitive marks, and the ground are both suits. So they'd be my kind of 2v the field.
Lovely stuff. Vincent, any views for yourself?
Yeah, I'd agree with most of what Ed says, but I have a slightly different opinion on last year's race personally. The first thing is, as Ed said, one of the things here is going to be the draw. 3 of the last 4 winners of this had draw numbers in the 20s. So you're looking for a high draw, preferably for me anyway. I'd be preferring a high draw here than a low one. There's little doubt about that on recent evidence at least. And as Ed said, this is the exact same going description that they raced on last year. Good to soft in places. Bielsa won the race last year. No horse has won this 2 years running. That's the first thing to take into account. But Bielsa is only a pound higher than when it won the race last year. Mr. Wagyu has gone up quite a bit because it's been in great form this season, including only last week at the Curragh where it finished third in a big sprint there. So gone up a lot in the ratings. That's the first thing for Mr. Wagyu. I think he's 4 or 5 pound higher than he was in this race last year. The one I like is the horse that finished fourth in this last year, which is Matagali. The only thing with this horse is it was a different trainer last year. It was with Charlie Hills last year when it finished fourth. Has only run twice this season, but had a very good run last week. Only a week ago in the Portland Handicap, finished 5th of 19 in that. That for me is a sign that this horse is coming back to its best. Wasn't beaten that far in the race last year and is now 4 pounds lower than it was last year. The other contender in this from last year's race is Comanche Falls, who's had a terrific season after being involved in some very big races already this year. But Comanche Falls is quite a bit higher and has to carry 9 stone 12. I'd be against that personally, plus the fact that it's got a relatively low draw number here as well. But Matagali drawn 22. There's already been a bit of money for this. This was 20 and 25 yesterday. It's into about 14s at the moment. Even on the exchange, it's halved in price over the last 24 hours as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see that run a big race at a biggish price.
Lovely stuff. Well, yeah, not exactly very easy to find the winner exactly, but I feel like we've covered most of the good chances at least. So let's move on now. We're going to go over to Newbury. We're going to go look at the Dubai International Airport World Trophy Stakes. So here, the 2:15, 13 declared, a 5 furlong sprint as well. Ed, take us through your initial thoughts on this one. We got Roger Varian actually is in decent form as opposed to Kevin Ryan. Take us through your feelings on this race.
Yeah, fascinating one, isn't it? As you say, Mitabi would be the Varian representative in here. But I'd imagine, I haven't actually got the bet in front of me, but Manakan has been a horse going great guns at the moment. And I'd imagine have to make shortlist material in this assignment, along with the Clive Cox runner, Tis Marvellous, of course, who won last time out. So, yeah, tricky old race. I'm going to go for a real left of field one in here. I could do with a bit of rain at Newbury, but Method for Rob Hornby and Martin Mead is not a million miles out of this on peak form. I just think the horse won over 6 in the early part of his career, and I think Connections thought that was his trip, but I just don't think he sees out 6 furlongs. I think he's one of those kind of 5.5 furlong horses. He's just too keen. Whenever they've dropped him back to the minimum trip, to his credit, he's run some absolute crackers. He was third in the Group 3 at Sandown when dropped back to 5 earlier in the season. He was runner-up at Newmarket in the Group 3 a couple of years ago when dropped back to 5 furlongs. They ran him in the Stewards Cup over 6 last time out and in the Hackwood the time before that. Just far too keen. Didn't get home. So I just wonder here, coming back to minimum trip again, maybe slightly forgotten. He's got a few pounds to find. But I think if they go hard at front, as I said, I think he's a good stayer at 5 furlongs without quite seeing out 6. I think he's a bit finicky, shall we say. But Method, Rob Hornby on board as an each-way play. Again, this is, we say, Stephen's off skiving in his Greek 5-star hotel, and he's left us with all the really easy races to try and pick apart while he's topping up his tan. But Method for me, 25 to 1 there or thereabouts. A tentative each-way selection in a race which I am scratching my head over.
And Vincent, for you, any stronger views than what Ed has?
Well, one of the things to take into account here for me is the trip is the first thing. It's 5 furlongs. There's several of these want further. One of them is the Irish contender, Teresa Mendoza. Ken Condon, Martin Harley rides it. She's not a 5 furlong filly, in my opinion. Definitely wants 6. This is her 4th time to go to the UK in search of black type, and she hasn't won over there yet. I don't expect her to win. Personally, I think she's too short a price, in my opinion. Another one here is Chill Chill, another one that wants 6 furlongs. In my opinion, again, ran well in the Sprint Cup at Haydock in a first-time tongue strap. The last day, the tongue strap is retained. Have a chance, but I think the trip is wrong again. One I do like is one I mentioned on a previous trip or a previous show, is A Day to Remember, which came over to Ireland the last day. One of my colleagues has a share in this filly, and she was very unlucky in the Irish race. She got a low draw in Naas and was well punted to win that day, and backed into favourite in the finish. The problem was they watered the round track in Naas. So when she came out of stall one on the sprint track, she ended up running up on the softened ground. Whereas the rest of them were all out wide, and all the ones that beat her, she only died out of it in the last few yards. That was 5 furlongs, 205 yards. It was only in the last 100 yards that she lost the lead and got swallowed up by 4 of them, went by her. There was bits and pieces between them. I'd be surprised if she doesn't run well. She's never run a bad race in her life. She'll be there or thereabouts at a decent price, I would have thought. The other one here is Tis Marvellous, which is a prolific winner throughout its career. Dropped to listed level to win at Beverley the last day, has been highly tried in several races. So it's been placed 4 times here before, was third in this race last year. I'd be surprised if that's not involved as well. But this is a tricky contest, to be honest with you.
Yeah, always good fun to get these really tricky races on the show. But yeah, thanks a lot for your views on that one. Next, we're going to move on to the Mill Reef at Newbury, so the 250. We've got 7 declared here, so perhaps a little bit easier to kind of pick out the main fancies for this one. I did touch on Roger Varian's form of late. I mean, he's got a 24% strike rate in the last 3 weeks. So obviously we're in high form. You've got Sakir here, the even money favourite. Vincent, do you think the market's got it right for this one?
I don't, to be honest with you. I think the favourite's definitely too short. It was a wide margin winner on when it won its maiden at Haydock in a quick time. Admittedly, won 6 lengths, but we've very little to go on here. The 7 runners, none of them have ever run against each other, so we've no linked form between them to be able to say one is better than another on any particular run. The Hannon one is the one here that looks potentially some value. Should have been, what is it called? Should have been a ring. A 4-time winner. Won a big valuable sales race, big field valuable sales race, then won a listed race last time. Like, it has a high level of form here, and on the basis of everything, I think that should be favourite. That's my opinion on it. Clive Cox won this race last year. He's got Heroism, and he won this race last year, and he won it before, I think, with Harry's Angel as well. So he's a good record in the race. So Heroism won first time out. Looks like a fair performance there too. Debut winner at Salisbury last month. Tricky enough race, but I think the favourite is definitely too short, in my opinion, based on just the wide margin win in a small field last time out.
And Ed, I see you nodding along there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, again, it's just price dictates. I mean, Sakir did make mincemeat of his rivals last time out, but looks skinny enough, as you say, in a race full of unexposed, could be anythings. And I'll be looking at this Clive Cox runner here, Heroism, who the yard, as Vincent said, won this last year with Wings of War. They won it a few years ago as well with Harry Angel. You know, they've got a pretty good record, a good strike rate in this assignment. And watching Heroism's run back at Salisbury, there was a Owen Burrows hot pot in there at 2-7, which, you know, couldn't lose. Yet, I mean, this Clive Cox individual just went past that horse like it was stood still in the closing stages. I think this horse could be well above average, which you're going to need to be to win this. But interesting horses coming in the deep end on the back of just that Salisbury maiden run, and so did it in good style. Yard have got a good record in this race. Adam Kirby on board will need to, you know, raise the level once again here, but I think has every opportunity to do so. So it's just one of those at the prices, you know. If Heroism was kind of 4-1, 9-2, I'd be looking elsewhere. But I think 8 is, I'd take my chance at that type of price, that there's more improvement in the locker. Whereas with Sakir, all the kind of fun in that price has disappeared, hasn't it? So yeah, Heroism for me, Kirby and Cox, would be my selection.
Like it. Yeah, nice. And now we're going to move on to the last feature race we've got from Gowran Park. So Vincent, just take us through. You mentioned there were some other interesting races. We're going to focus on this one in particular, but just take us through what you're thinking of the card here at Gowran on Saturday.
Yeah, the first thing that's interesting here is that this is a Group 3 again for fillies, and we've got 18 runners. We've already discussed a Group 3 in Newbury with 13 runners for fillies, and there was one in Ayr as well. We also have 13 runners for a 2-year-old fillies race there. Seems to be the key to get a decent field, doesn't it? Make it for fillies and make it group or listed class, and you'll get them all turning up. This is an interesting race for lots of reasons. Obviously, it's the biggest flat race Gowran Park have. It's been on their calendar for many years, and it is in memory of a record producer from the 1960s called Denny Cordell. His official name is Denny Cordell Laverick, but he was known as Denny Cordell. He actually lived in the area from the 1980s through to the mid-90s when he died, and he was a real character, to be honest with you. During the 60s, he would have, as some of the records and some of the bands he was looking after, the likes of Procol Harum, Whiter Shade of Pale, which you'd probably remember as a classic. He had Joe Cocker with a little help from My Friends. He also looked after the Cranberries in their early days as well. So he great stuff. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, another one that he looked after. So a real character, and he also bred and trained both greyhounds and horses, and he trained his first winner at Gowran Park, which is why this race is in his memory here. But we've got a hell of a field for this now. 18 lined up. I fancy the one that's tipped there in the form scan by Tom Weeks on our website, Galleria Borghese. Very hard to beat. You've got a lot of things in its favour here. It was a 66-1 shot in the Blandford Stakes only last week at the Curragh, but finished third. It's a big run. She had 115 rated La Petite Coco, a neck behind that day, so that's a fair performance. She also had Tranquil Lady, which is in here, which was well backed in that Blandford Stakes, back from 16-1 into 13-2, but dropped out tamely over the last furlong, and that finished down the field. Tranquil Lady, they're now putting the tongue strap on, hoping for a return to better form. But Galleria Borghese, if it reproduces the run the last day, the trip here is no problem. It's just short of 1.25 miles. The ground is soft, which is similar to what it's run on before and run well on before. I'd be very surprised if this gets beat. This is a real, looks like one for me that if you want to back one at a shortish price, it won't be a big price for this. Probably looking at about 3-1, I'd imagine. But definitely worth a bet at something like that. It's Aidan O'Brien, obviously, so you'd expect they wouldn't be running this filly again unless she was right. I think she will be right. We've a UK runner here as well. We'll go through some of these. Cowida. Declan McDonough gets the ride on this. It was 5th to Tuesday in the Epsom Oaks. Hampered when last in the Lancashire Oaks. Not beaten far in a Group 3 in Deauville the last day. Would have a squeak. There's no doubt about that. That's a contender as well. Sigamia is another one here. It's got a wide draw. The problem with some of these is you wouldn't want to be drawn too wide in Gowran Park. So Cowida's drawn 1, Galleria Borghese drawn 3, but Sigamia now has been in very good form, but is drawn out in the car park at 16. No problem with the ground. The trip is a question mark there. All its form is over shorter. Not certain to. Looks like a 7 furlong and mile. I don't think it's run beyond a mile yet, so we're looking at an extra furlong and 110 yards. So you'd be questioning that a little bit. Magic Chagawa here is another one. Big handicap winner at Galway. Colin Keane rides. The only thing is it has run here before on soft ground and run poorly a couple of times. So I'd be question marking that. And outside of that, there's a few with little squeaks at big prices. A few of these, what happens in these races with the fillies and mares looking for black type is people just throw anything in here, hoping that the look of the draw, if they can get a bit of black type, they're worth money going to stud and everything else. But realistically, Galleria Borghese would be very hard to beat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know you listed it as your nap of the weekend as well. So, hopefully we'll get some win for you there. But Ed, just take us through your thoughts on the race. I mean, do you echo the views of Vincent there?
Yeah, I couldn't compete with Vincent's comprehensive coverage on that one. By and large, as you say, that the former Galleria Borghese looks pretty strong. Another one, funny enough, Vincent mentioned, Tranquil Lady. Obviously, the tongue tie goes on for the first time. Soft ground would be no problem. And she won a Group 3 earlier in the campaign on this type of surface. It's just whether this tongue tie can bring her back to life. But some of her earlier form is very good. I said you got that Group 3 win. She wasn't beaten far in the listed race, and she was far from disgraced in the Oaks at Epsom, wasn't she? When you look at the fillies that were ahead of her, the likes of Tuesday, Nashwa, Concert Hall, she was just a nose behind Cowida on that occasion. On her best form, she is right in the mix here. You say you've got a little bit concerned her run last time out, but she had a bit of a wonder if something came to light, and the tongue tie does go on for the first time. So I wouldn't be shocked if Tranquil Lady reproduced her old form on the back of a few months off the track. But no, we'll go in with rowing with Vincent's selection here at Galleria Borghese in a race where I do have rather how should we say, fence-sitting views.
All right, well, let's get you off the fence then, Ed, and let's get you on to your tips of the week. Take us through your selections for the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 3 coming up here, as always. The best bet would be Phantom Flight. The James Horton, rookie trainer James Horton's been having a wonderful time of things. This Phantom Flight's just been on fire. Went to a York handicap over 10 furlongs last time out off a mark of 98. They didn't see which way this individual went. Power clear, went 5 lengths clear in the closest stages, eased down. Gone up to listed company here, but to be honest with you, I would not be shocked if Phantom Flight was getting involved in some group races by the time the winter draws in. I just think it'll be too good for them. So is my nap at 7-4. The value pick will be Siskiny in the Legacy Cup. A bit of an intriguing individual, this one, but again, on peak form, I think is the one they've all got to pass. Adam Kirby in the saddle for the informed Charlie Appleby team. I say informed, they've been operating in a 33% strike rate for the entire calendar year, but on official figures, is pretty much the best horse in the field, brings some really good form to the tables, gone well fresh before, so I wouldn't be too concerned about the fact this horse has had 7 months off the track. Horse has an excellent record when fresh. In fact, has won on all 3 occasions when the horse has had a break of 3 months or more. Some crazy stat which I've actually lost in front of me. But the bigger picture being this horse that has no issue in going well first time up. So I think Siskiny can win there. And then we discussed the Ayr Gold Cup, where I've kind of got about 9 different tips in it, depending on who I talk to. But jokes aside, on balance, as an each way play, I'm going to go with Mr. Wagyu. Again, check your each way terms. Might get some bookmakers tripping over themselves for 7 or 8 places, giveaways, 9 places, money back offers, all that kind of jazz. But Mr. Wagyu, John Quinn, Vincent did make a good point. Officially, it is £4 higher than last year. However, it's officially £2 well in, courtesy of the run at the Curragh. From Monday, will actually go up £2, regardless of what happens here, I believe. So, all in all, I think Mr. Wagyu, no excuses with draw, trip, ground, anything like that, trainer form. Hoping could smuggle into the first 6 or 7 at around 12-1.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Ed. Best of luck to you. And Vincent, take it away with your selections, please.
Yeah, we've mentioned 2 of these already. Galleria Borghese, Group 3 in Gowran Park. It's a big field. It's got a low draw, which is definitely going to be an advantage. Has no problem with the ground or trip, and a reproduction of her recent Curragh third looks good enough for me. The value one, I think it should be value. I think it might be a bit of a price, and it should run well, is Salt Whistle Bay. This was a 4-time winner in the UK in his younger days. Cheek pieces have brought about improvement the last twice, finished third the last twice. Generally races close to the pace, so stall 1 will be a help here. I think the horse prefers a mile than the trip the last day was a mile 1, so all things to suit. All the wins in the UK were also on soft ground, which is interesting, and it hasn't raced much on soft ground in Ireland, particularly hasn't done so with the cheek pieces on, so that could be a contender at a bit of a price. And then the long shot I mentioned already is in the Ayr Gold Cup. Mota Gali finished 4th in the race last year, £4 lower this time. It's only had 2 runs. As I said, the big one is it ran really well in the Portland Handicap last week. I've also looked at the horse has won before off a short break, as low as 10 days before it came out and won a race, and another time off 16 days. So the 1 week break shouldn't be the end of the world here. You just worry about the fact that the horse hasn't produced a whole lot of runs this season. It's only had the 2, but it does come here fresh and could have a chance.
Lovely stuff. I think that wraps it up for today's show. Best of luck to you, Vincent, as well, of course. We'll be sure to come back next week with more tips and betting advice. Also, subscribe to Irish Racing on YouTube, as we'll be back on Tuesday for our reaction show with Johnny, Vincent and Emma as well, of course. But thanks a lot for watching. And if you do place a bet, as always, please do gamble responsibly. We'll see you again very soon.